Yo, what's good, y'all? Welcome back to the channel, man. I'm really happy to have y'all here once again. We're reacting to rugby. This time it's going to be New Zealand and South Africa. It's a video about how they became the biggest rivals. I reacted to a couple New Zealand videos along with the Haka and a few of their players. And I also reacted to a handful of South African rugby. But this is going to be the first time I actually sit down and genuinely get to watch and listen about some of the history. And I feel like this is really good timing, especially for today. We get to upload this video. Tomorrow we're actually going to release part 2 because this is nearly a 40-minute video and I would be talking for hours. And then we're going to be live the 22nd for a watch along for that game, so I better see you there. Alright, man, with that being said, let's hop into the video, man. Big shout out to Squidge Rugby. I think this is the first time I've ever actually reacted to him, so I'm going to go ahead and give him a like, do the same to this video. If it feels like I'm not talking as much or anything, it's just because I'm locked in. Sometimes I can't talk and concentrate at the same time, so that's why I'm just really trying to learn everything about it.
There's one phrase that follows everyone invested in sport. It's a phrase that can be anything. A doubt, a question of reassurance, a belittling beat, a phrase that taps from the outside at any emotion sport whiffs up. It's only a game. Whether it's a creeping thought as you wonder why you're flying across the world to watch your team lose, sighed from beside as you scream in delight at the last-minute winner, or said in reassurance by a loved one right after a hideous mauling, for generations, that one little phrase has boiled down the great human fascination that is sport into something simple, straightforward, and small. And yet, whilst we all know otherwise in our heart of hearts, if there ever was one fixture that truly is more than just a game, it might just be the one taking place in Joburg this weekend. Over 106 matches across 103 years, arguably no fixture in any sport has ever been so laced with history, politics, excellence,
Wait, that's insane, bro. Hold on, what did he say?
Joburg this weekend. Over 106 matches across 103 years.
106 matches over 103 years?
Arguably no fixture in any sport has ever been so laced with history, politics, excellence, exceptionalism, and importance as the New Zealand All Blacks against the South African Springboks.
The Haka. We need to put out a part 2 reaction of the Haka.
Rugby, but a fixture that has consistently changed the world. This is the story of 106 blocks of 80 minutes that shaped every hour in between for two nations for whom this clash meant
Heck yeah, let's go.
Despite falling in love with the game in 1861 and 1870 respectively, South Africa and New Zealand wouldn't meet for the first time until 1921. It's a collision course that felt written, paired on similar trajectories throughout their early rugby years. The sport arrived in both nations via education, a pupil and headmaster each bringing rugby back from trips to London. And in the early 1900s, both nations headed back that way, back from whence they came. The 1905 New Zealand team, one of the sport's most famous and important sides, arrived on the British Isles unfancied, expected to lose every game. They were a novelty act. New Zealand won 34 of their 35 games, losing only to a Golden Era Wales team in a game dubbed the Match of the Century.
Okay, so after it got popular in South Africa and New Zealand, they went on tour, expected to lose every single game back in the Northern Hemisphere, and they only lost one game. That's what I got from that. Wow.
The All Blacks captured the public's imagination. New Zealand won 34 of their 35 games, losing only to a Golden Era Wales team in a game dubbed the Match of the Century. The All Blacks captured the public's imagination. The tour was a huge success, and British rugby bosses started looking for another name to fill the bill to repeat the tour. The 1906 South Africa team, which should be one of the sport's most famous and important sides, arrived in the British Isles unfancied, expected to lose every game. They were a novelty act. South Africa won 26 of their 29 games with one draw, losing only to Scotland and Cardiff. Their shock defeat of then best team in the world, Wales, oh God please take me back, is one of rugby's greatest ever upsets.
That's... Bro, you sounded like a true Jets fan right now, or like a Browns fan. Nah, I can't even say Browns. Browns are never good. That's funny though. Wales. Yeah, I've been hearing a lot saying that Wales has had a rough spot in the past couple decade or so, maybe a few more. That's funny, though.
It's akin to the Democratic Republic of Congo forming a team tomorrow and beating the Springboks themselves 3 years later. It was unbelievable. In the space of 2 years, the All Blacks and the Springboks, both nicknames gained on those tours, had gone from a standing start to the biggest brands in the
It's only
sport.
2
Symbols
years,
that
wow.
meant excellent and inspired pride back home. South Africa was still recovering from the bloody Anglo-Boer War, and seeing a tour party comprised of both British and Afrikaners, both sides uniting under one flag, was huge on its own. But seeing that new flag defeat both the best team in the world and the nation
That's
who had
got to do
occupied, colonized their
something
country a century earlier was an enormously
for your
important moment
country.
of unity,
Yeah.
pride and independence for South Africa as a state. Whilst for New Zealand, the decision by the mostly white touring party to perform the haka before each game on the trip represented the not insignificant embrace of Maori culture, a want for the black jersey to represent all of New Zealand, something felt enormously back home. Rugby grew in importance to both nations either side of the First World War, appetite building for a clash between the two cultures. For decades, this game was discussed, longed for by fans, administrators and players alike. A world war, meaning logistics, took 20 whole years to make it happen. The two teams finally met in 1921, when a South Africa side arrived in New Zealand, fresh off an unbeaten tour of Australia.
1956.
Set to play 24 games, climaxing with a 3-test series against the Blacks, dubbed at the time the World Championship of Rugby. The Boks were an instant hit. Spectators were fascinated.
Footage from 1931, the closest I can find a 1921 test, and some from the earliest. Wow. I mean, not really much looks different other than the kits, just by a little bit.
Obsessed with their seemingly new style of playing.
And there's not really like any really huge guys. You're not gonna find any oxes in there, you know.
So brutal, physical, such emphasis on the scrum. And off the pitch, the touring party were the most gracious and popular of guests, making appearances at town halls, schools, dances, even accepting invitations to workplaces.
That's so
and
cool.
In one case, the entire extended Springbok squad turned up to one rugby-mad 10-year-old girl's birthday party. With war in Europe and the influenza pandemic that killed almost 30,000 New Zealanders, having brought Test rugby to a standstill, the first test against the Boks was the All.
Hold on, I just want to say first off, I love history videos like this. I love learning about history. I wouldn't say I'm good at history. I just love learning the history of things. All right, let me rewind here.
10-year-old girl's birthday party. With war in Europe and the influenza pandemic that killed almost 30,000 New Zealanders, having brought Test rugby to a standstill, the first test against the Boks was the All Blacks' first hit out in 7 years. The nation brought together on a Saturday with the kind of pride and emotional unity you can only inspire these days by calling a Frenchman the best player of all time. The game was opened by a rare hacker on New Zealand soil, and the Boks responded with a Zulu war cry. It was a build-up unlike any other in the sport.
Oh, dude, I bet that was. Oh, I'm getting goosebumps right now.
This was history. Winger Attie van Heerden, who had competed in the previous year's Summer Olympics and to this day is the only Springbok to ever compete in a non-rugby event at the Olympic Games, very much the Cobus Ronak's dad of his time, opened the scoring, outpacing his opponents to dot down in the corner. The All Blacks, however, would get it together and get the better of the second half. 3 unanswered tries, giving them a 13-5 victory.
So this was in 1921.
Between these two teams. The Boks would strike back to win the second test 9-5. A drop goal from fullback Gerard Morkel proving crucial, but as friend of the channel, Jamie Wall put it in his superb book, The 100-Year War, which I can't recommend highly enough for further reading on the topics. If you're in any way interested in videos,
okay, there's a
very,
book.
Very good book. Covers so much more we can't cover here. What this tour would be
I should
renowned
get that
for
book.
happened not on the rugby field, but in a post office. Just
That
down
should
the
be
road.
like the first book I ever read.
Rugby had been an instant phenomenon amongst Maori cultures in New
1922,
Zealand.
so
Indeed,
a year
the first
later.
Kiwi representative team of
Oh,
any
this
ilk
is-
prior to the All Blacks' first test match, years later, was put together by Maoris and contained 22 of their own people. Most of these would go on to become huge figures in towns and regional-sized cult favourites in New Zealand.
This is Joseph Warbrick. At age 15, he became the youngest man to ever. 15? 15 years old? That's a record to this day. He would go on to play the first ever New Zealand national team and captain the natives on their tour. He was the captain at 15 years old.
England over Aotearoa in
He arranged the fixtures, secured the funding. Bro, that's insane at
the early
15
20th
years
century was
old.
not kind to Maori culture, suppressing language, tradition, centering schools and forcing assimilation through law. Yet
I actually didn't know that. I don't know any of the history in any of these countries. I'm going to be honest with you. It's not really taught here. I mean, it is if you want to learn it, you know, but it's not base level education what happened in these like countries' wars, you know?
On the rugby field, things were different. The Maori style of play was championed, popular, and through the haka, that culture, so often sidelined, was celebrated. In this one area of life, the Maori people were treated like superheroes, and crowds wanted to watch them play.
That's
such,
cool.
When Fixtures was drawn up, the organisers must have seen it as a surefire hit to pit the hugely popular Springboks against a newly formed team comprising of the best Maori players from across the country.
So I mean, they're playing with the chip on their shoulder, bro. They're playing with something to prove. You know, I mean, whether it comes down to race, politics, segregation, whatever it is, man. Whenever a whole team can bring together a country and show the world that, hey, bro, this is us. You know, it's awesome.
Those first two tests, the organisers must have seen it as a surefire hit to pit the hugely popular Springboks against a newly formed team comprising of the best Maori players from across the country. But where those first two tests had started one half of what made this fixture famous, the highest intensity rugby matches between sides who are usually the two best teams in the world, the match against the Maori would kickstart the other big, reoccurring theme of rugby union clashes between New Zealand and South Africa. Greeted by a huge crowd of mostly white spectators, travelling journalist Charles Blackett would send a telegram back to South Africa that evening, labelling this the most unfortunate match ever played. For whilst the game's build-up was in good spirit, after Bok players turned their backs on the arranged pre-match poi dancing of Maori tradition, mood shifted. In Blackett's words, the South African team and manager Harold Bennett had been frankly disgusted by, and I quote, I can't stress this enough, this is a quote, the sight of thousands of Europeans frantically cheering on a band of coloured men to defeat members of their own race. He described the crowd as the most unsportsmanlike he'd ever seen and accused the Maori of foul play, suggesting
that's insane, bro. What?
They set out to deliberately injure Bok players. The animosity quickly became mutual. Maori hooker Sam Gemmell telling young wing Jack Blake that day, Jackie, today we are playing for our race. Blackett's telegram was intercepted and published in its entirety a few days later in the Kiwi press. In the time it took for the ink to dry, the nation...
That's disgusting, dude. What? What, so they set this whole match up to what? Just spit in their face? That's disgusting, bro. That's insane, bro. How many fans were there just to be cheering and throwing things? And that's disgusting, bro. How long ago was this? Like, what are we doing?
Pedal apology, saying what great hosts and clean competitors Maori team been, but the sentiment by then had already stuck. The tide had changed. The build-up to that decisive third test was as intense as the first, but with a different flavour. 35,000
for a different reason
from the uncovered stands as torrential rain created an underwhelming 0-0 draw and a tied series. Once again, setting up a great tradition of tight games between these teams. Puddles on the pitch, leaving little room for rugby, and a tour that at this point desperately needed it. When officials from the NZRU would suggest a return tour after the game, Bennett told them, in no uncertain terms, not to send any Maori players if it ever does happen, as they would not be welcome nor safe in South Africa. For 55 of the 103 years this fixture has been played, the NZRU listened to that advice, his words directly impacting selection for the first few tours the All Blacks made to South Africa. For the 1928, 1949, and 1960 trips, the All Blacks left all Maori and non-white players at home. This would include the likes of then-star player, the recently departed great of the game, Sid Going, future NZRU president Brian Williams, and then captain Johnny Smith, who was dropped to comply with Bennett's demands in 1949 and never played for the All Blacks again. However, the discarding of an All Black captain was hardly top priority in South Africa at the time, as the previous year's general election had set in motion the creation of a policy that we now refer to as apartheid. Apartheid was the right to racism enshrined in law, racial segregation enforced and non-whites treated as second-class citizens. It was, much like the current rise of the alt-right, hatred and bigotry dressed up as policy, a fear of feeling empathy disguised as legitimate concerns. This only strengthened as the years went on and became the backdrop to the 1960 tour, the most controversial rugby has seen up to that point, as protests and debate hung louder than the rugby. The All Blacks' traditional trial match was abandoned after protesters stormed the pitch. 160,000 people signed a petition to abandon the tour, an incredible number in the pre-social media race. This was the 60s. Over 3...
Good, bro. I reacted to a video and I was like, "Oh, they're protesting, they're ruining the sport, whatever." I didn't understand the what was behind the protest, and I didn't understand that they were actually protesting against racial discrimination. So that kind of made me look bad there, but I didn't know what it was, so it's all good.
3,000 people marched on Parliament to demand a stop. The All Blacks plane was delayed hours after a phoned-in hoax bomb threat by protesters. The public backlash led to the NZRU turning down tour after tour until, in 1969, they struck a deal with the South African government. 6 players of Maori or Samoan descent would be granted honorary white status, allowing them to enter the country and play.
Honorary white status? That's what you had to call it? What?
Many in New Zealand saw this honorary white status as progress, but thousands of others saw it as little more than cowardice without a backbone. By accepting the tour under these conditions, the All Blacks were showing a total lack of principles, positioning rugby above human rights. The decision to tour was seen as the All Blacks condoning the apartheid regime. Prop and key player Ken Gray retired from rugby rather than travel, a decision he put down to his own moral feeling. Coach Fred Allen, who still stands the most successful coach in the sport's history, undefeated in his 57 games in charge, stepped down himself after a fallout of the NZRU that year. In this period, most Olympic sports banned South Africa from competing. FIFA expelled them. Cricket's ICC introduced a 4-year ban from test matches for playing in the nation. And yet the All Blacks, off the back of this, decided to arrange another tour to be played in 1976.
That's crazy. I didn't know all this. I didn't know any of this was happening. I didn't know. I gotta look more into this.
And this is where things really caught fire. The Boks won the series 3-1, the All Blacks also losing to Western Province and the Free State. But the true legacy of this tour happened once again not on the pitch, but half a world away in Montreal, as on the day of the opening ceremony for the 1976 Olympic Games, 33 nations, including almost every African state competing, withdrew from the Games in protest of the actions of New Zealand. As the only nation in an active sporting relationship with South Africa, there had been mass lobbying for the Kiwis to be barred from the game, but the IOC refused. The NZRU was an independent body, separate to the Olympic Board, and so nothing could really be done. And yet 33 nations and thousands of athletes withdrew. Countless events were cancelled, costing the IOC $1 million in the first 2 days alone. Rugby wasn't present, but it was the story. New Zealand's decision to tour had torn the world's biggest sporting event apart. The fallout from the tour led to Commonwealth countries coming together to decide what would become known as the Gleneagles Agreement, barring all sporting contact with South Africa. In his book Goodbye to Glory that year, Kiwi journalist Terry McLean surmised this surely had to represent the end of rugby contact, sporting contact between the two nations for the foreseeable future, if not forever. And yet, the NZRU made a decision that 5 years later threatened to instead tear apart New Zealand itself. The 1981 Springbok Tour was a genuinely critical moment in both sporting and New Zealand history, and yet one that is still shockingly little known these days outside the two nations concerned. A moment in which rugby mattered, and a moment in which sport shaped the world. The Springboks had travelled over to play 16 games over just under 3 months, from July to late September. Wow. The tour was controversial when it was announced. Slid back from 1980 to 81 at the Prime Minister's request. The build up the tour was fraught, angry, and yet, when it came around, even the co-founder of resistance group Halt All Racist Tours, Trevor Richards, said he was taken aback by the sheer scale of the backlash reaction. The tour was unlike anything New Zealand had ever seen before. Protests against became a daily occurrence, some as small as 50 people, but others reaching into the tens of thousands. In response, the New Zealand police were taught for the first time ever to use riot gear, armed for the first time in Kiwi history. Helmets, shields, batons, given out, taught.
In the 80s.
Riot squads were created. The result was bedlam. Officers fresh off lessons in how best to beat someone up, using their newfound knowledge on peaceful protesters, demonstrations turning into riots across the country in every major town and city. Tension went up and up every single day until on the opening day of the tour, roughly 150 protesters attempted to disrupt the opening match, only to be met with unheralded resistance. Hundreds of officers, armed for the first time in Kiwi history, barbed wire erected around the stadium in the days leading up, and bloody noses handed out to anyone who tried to do anything other than politely sit on the sidelines and applaud. And yet these protests would get the better of the same efforts come the second game in Hamilton, just a few days later.
Hey bro, I mean, they might as well just get into a scrum formation at this point.
Despite the presence of over 500 policemen officers, some 300 of the 5,000 plus demonstrators there that day were able to make it onto the pitch, causing these scenes. Fans eager for the game to go ahead threw bottles from the stands, rocks that they found, anything they could get their hands on. It caused a scene of mass violence on the pitch, the like only seen since in the Pro Day Duh. Around 50 were arrested, once again something only seen in the Pro Day Duh, but this wasn't enough to secure the game. The match was called up, something that has never happened in the Pro Day Duh, and it became a major talking point, a critical moment in Kiwi rugby history. And yet, somewhere, 7,000 miles away, and any number of years later, Nelson Mandela would describe hearing that game being called off from inside his cell in Robben Island as feeling like the sun.
It's all clicking.
To him,
I'm getting
others
goosebumps.
locked up on the
I don't know
island,
if you guys
it was a
can see.
sign that this world and this sport would not stand for what apartheid represented. It was a moment that proved that sport could create change. However, this wasn't the only moment from the year's test to hand Robben Island hope. For 1981 was also the year that Errol Tobias became the first ever black man to play for the Springboks, playing multiple games on this tour. Years later, Mandela would tell Tobias, hearing he'd been selected to play for the exclusively white team felt like seeing light for the first time after months of darkness. He loved a light metaphor. A further game against South Canterbury would be called off later in the tour, but perhaps the most iconic image of those 3 months came after Eden Park was put on total lockdown for the third test.
Why?
Shipping containers were dropped around the perimeter, fences put up, an emergency exit created for players just in case, and yet there was one route the officials didn't.
Quite an unusual feeling of tenseness because there is a light plane circling the ground and dipping in low and dropping things into the crowd. And those are the gestures from the crowd as the plane comes over yet again. There's the plane coming in very low over Eden Park. It seems to me to be just above the grandstand height. Flower bombs have landed on the field and are going to be cleared away as the All Black team comes on. First half, and down on the left-hand end of the ground there is a stoppage. Smoke bombs have been thrown onto Eden Park at the left-hand end of the field. Smoke bombs, flares, being an attempt to come onto the field.
Wow.
The game will stop.
Is it? So it's crazy like this every time they play? Not every time they play, but like...
Flower bombs
this was
dropping
for
onto the
a
park.
reason.
Flares dropping as well from... Are they coming from the sky or coming out of the crowd?
Well, I think it's 6 of one and half dozen the other. Some of the flares have come from the number 3 stand, but others have been dropped from the plane that's flying round.
Gary Knight was struck by a flower bomb and it knocked him over. He's just got to his feet again, and you can see Gary Knight was struck by a flower bomb dropped from the plane. Now I guess that would be a tremendous thump.
That's crazy that everybody's still in the stands, bro. If this was the United States, we'd all be gone, bro.
And meanwhile, the lecture continues with...
and they're still
Clive
playing?
Lloyd talking to the 2 captains.
2 protesters by the name of Mark Jones and Grant Cole piloting a plane over the pitch during play, dropping bags of flour on the field. The now infamous flower bomb test is one of All Black Rugby's most famous days, and a moment encapsulated a tour that prompted so much searching within the nation as well as overseas. John Minto, the public face of Hearten, still a protester to this day, later said that the true legacy of the tour wasn't the message it sent to South Africa, but the conversation it started about race within New Zealand, particularly around the treatment of the Maori people against a backdrop of land seizures and oppressive laws. Historian Jock Phillips would later describe those 3 months in 1981 as the moment New Zealand became an independent Pacific nation instead of the Britain of the South Seas it considered itself previously.
Holy crap, bro. Alright, man. Hey, that was part 1. If you want to see part 2, it's coming out tomorrow around the same time. I'm uploading at like midnight around my time, so I don't know what time that is for you guys. I'm Eastern Standard Time, so I don't know what other times that is. But yeah, man, thank you guys so much for watching. If you really enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, subscribe. I'm almost at 2,500 subs, bro. That's insane. Yo, my birthday is in 2 days. All right, man. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.
We can take a trip. We can triple take a trip.